Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to Mr. Beat reacting to me. This is actually going to be a clip from a live stream I did on the main channel a while back, where I did some reactions to YouTubers who were reacting to me. So I'm going to be putting those out on the reaction channel. But I already did put them out on my Clips channel, which is a small channel that not a lot of people have found so far. So if you haven't subscribed to that new channel, be sure to go over there and subscribe. It's just Genie Vlogger Clips. But with that, let's jump into the video. Yeah, dang, his video is 2 hours. That's why I was saying we're not going to watch all of it, because he did 2 live streams. Because he did one live stream reacting to the first 3 episodes and a second live stream reacting to the last 4. So what we're going to do is we're just going to watch one episode from this stream, and then I think we're going to watch 2 episodes from the second stream, because the second stream he actually does 1.5 speed on it, which works out pretty well. And so yeah, we might click through a bit of this.
Tonight's a lot different. I'm still reacting to stuff, but these are very personal videos. I'm going to watch 3 videos from a genealogist he's also a YouTuber. His name is Jarrett Ross, and his YouTube channel is called Genealogist. Genealogist is how you pronounce it. Yes. And he reached out to me, what was it, a couple months ago now at this point. And he said, hey, I'm starting a new series where I'm looking at the family trees of YouTubers. And I figured I would reach out to history YouTubers first. And so
it's the perfect audience to mix, because history YouTubers audiences love history, and if I can present it in a way that's interesting to them, that was, yeah.
He reached out to a bunch of us.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon.
I think Sam Arno was his first series where he looked at Sam's family tree. He has a Jewish history channel. If you're not familiar with Sam, shout out to Sam. I've known him for a while through the internet. He lives in Israel and is a very smart person. And I'm, I guess, the second person he's done this with, and more to come. He's basically, it's like that. Remember that show? Well, there's been multiple shows like it. There was one on PBS, but there was
Finding Your Roots and Who Do You Think You Are?
Who Do You Think You Are? I think is the name of it. So that was like the most famous, and this is essentially what he's doing, but he's doing it better. And he's kind of showing his methodology and the process, and he's looking at it from different angles. And it really is like he's just being a detective, you know. Actually, a historian is really what genealogists are, historians.
Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and on today's vlog, I will be building Mr. Beat's family tree using only his DNA results.
I think that's his actual band.
That's my old band.
That music is his band.
Hello. And what's really funny is that song, the lyrics and everything is like not safe for work type of stuff. It was basically about being in college in like the mid 2000s. You know, I was in college 2006 to 2010. So it's kind of a party song. Everybody, welcome to season 2 of my new series. Oh, hey, look who's here. On the first season, we looked into Sam Arano's family tree, which I'm going to be linking up above somewhere, the playlist where you can watch that if you haven't yet. But on this season, we're going to be looking at Mr. Beat's
I am just a guy of whom several refer to as Mr. Beats
family tree, and we're only going to be using DNA. Mr. Beat is an educational YouTuber who focuses on videos about history, politics, geography, and other subjects related to the fact
I teach 7th grade social studies, and I love it.
When I first emailed him, I was a bit worried that he might not be interested based on his DNA results video.
A day or so ago, I was like, you know, it'd be fun to reveal those live on the air and kind of.
Yeah, when I was looking at all the YouTubers to contact, and the first time I contacted anyone, I looked up to see who had done DNA tests, if they'd done videos, and I was like so excited to contact Mr. Beat and be like, dude, do you want to do it? And then I saw this stream of his where he's like, yeah, I really wasn't into it and all that. I was like, oh no, he's probably gonna be like, thanks, but no thanks. And yeah, his response was definitely very
Talk a little bit about this is the live stream I was referencing. Yeah, that's from a couple years ago. You know what genealogy even means before I look at my own results, and some of you have been already guessing what my genealogy is in the chat, and that's wonderful. I am not necessarily that excited to see this. In fact, I couldn't care less. I consider myself an American. I consider myself
a human. I am a human. I'm not another species. I
What
just
a-
don't
who is this
care.
guy?
Like, it does fascinate me a little bit how much people focus on their dead relatives, like, and how much that means to them, to their identity. I've always been fascinated by it, but it never personally, like, I just don't, these people died a long time ago.
But I was very happy to see that he quickly responded that he was interested. Now, for a lot of people that don't really know much about me, I actually work as the lead forensic genetic genealogist at DNA Labs International.
No more.
And my job
No more. I
consists
quit.
of
I quit to do this full time.
taking DNA results from violent cases or unknown remains, and then using genetic genealogy to identify who the person was. So sometimes I'm identifying violent perpetrators, and sometimes I'm identifying unknown remains. And this is really new in forensic science, and this is something that a lot of people don't know a lot about, but they hear a whole lot about it because so many cases.
There we go.
Are now being solved using it. So this series is going to give you a very detailed look of what actually goes on in these types of cases when it comes to the genetic genealogy.
Yeah, that was really what I was really aiming for with this second season when I asked Matt about what he was willing to give me access to, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll give you all your, the DNA stuff and everything." And I went in and I was looking at the DNA matches before I even looked at the tree, and I was thinking, based on these matches, I could probably figure this out just using the DNA. And I was like, that's exactly what I'll do. And then I was like, I'll take it even one step further, because at that point, I mean, granted, over the past 5-6 years, it's been like every few months, there's some big headline about investigative genetic genealogy. But at that point, there was one of those, there seemed to be a lot of furor going around the news stations and different people who were misunderstanding what genealogists saw in the research. So I thought this would be perfect because I can show exactly what we see when we do this research, because it's pretty much exactly the same, slightly changed now because they have GEDmatch Pro for investigative cases. So you don't go to GEDmatch. There's a separate site that you have to sign contracts and do like this whole thing to be able to access. And you get less information than you do on regular GEDmatch. So I wanted to show that with this, and that was kind of the idea. So I should say with this episode, once we kind of get past the beginning, I'm not going to really watch through the actual DNA part. We're going to fast forward, I think, to the third episode, because it's I go hardcore on the tutorial side of it, which is why it was really slow.
I did that type of genealogy. So yeah, that's hopefully he's not finding any dark secrets of not only my past, but my ancestors' past.
One of the biggest things I see that people say when they're not sure of how to think about this stuff is, well, what does law enforcement get to see? What do the people doing this work get to see? A lot of people have some very realistic and reasonable worries about government having more access to more information about people. So on this series, you're going to get to see, what do we actually see when we do these law enforcement cases looking for violent perpetrators and trying to identify unknown remains. So on this series, I'm actually going to be limiting myself to what we get. So a lot of people know about databases like Ancestry, MyHeritage, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA. Then there's stuff like GEDmatch and a whole bunch of other websites as well. But when it comes to
when I've logged on to Ancestry.com a handful of times since I spit in the tube and sent my DNA in and revealed the countries where I'm from, and not a whole lot of my relatives actually are registered on that site. Only a couple of my cousins are, and I have a lot of cousins. I have first cousins. I have probably like 50 something first cousins, and so yes, big Catholic family. But not a lot of people, like not a lot of my family. Like I couldn't convince my own parents to spit in the tube, and I guess it was kind of expensive. But CFH Orbit Shorts.
But he did have a ton of like third cousins and more distant on there, which is why it was so easy to build his trees just using DNA, which I think is a common sentiment for a lot of people when they do these DNA tests. Is they're really thinking, because most of what they know is their first and second cousins, which even then, a lot of people don't know a lot of their second cousins. And like, even myself, I grew up knowing a good amount of my second cousins, but then there were some second cousins that I actually had to like find doing genealogy and stuff, and like found sometime in the past 15 years since I've been doing genealogy like really hardcore and all of that. So, you know, for a lot of people, when they do these tests, they'll look for the relatives they know, and they'll see people that they don't know and think, oh, well, that's really distant, when it actually may be a lot closer than you realize. So because it'd be very difficult for me to ignore any matches that might have the Beat name in their family tree, we're just going to assume that for whatever reason, we already have the name Beat as a possible name for the DNA results. So the first thing that we do is we want to look at the DNA matches to really see how good are the matches. If the matches that we have are really, really low, we may not be able to figure this out. If we have matches that are very, very high, we may be able to figure out in almost no time. For Matt, his was actually right in the middle. We had some decent matches, mostly right around the 150s. And then we had a lot below that, but nothing really above that. I will say, literally just yesterday before I started, getting ready to film, we did get a new match who was 327 centimorgans. And so I actually did kind of add her into the other information that we did build already. So we have some really good matches. And as I mentioned, we had one. I mean, for someone from a non-endogamous population group, this is a pretty nice match list to start out with. Because you're looking at a lot of matches where, I mean, considering the non-endogamy part, you're looking at a lot of matches that are within a reasonably genealogical time frame. It's really as you get smaller and further out, the range of the possibilities of relationships get wider and wider, and thus it gets harder and harder to figure out. But one of the interesting things that I, always noticed going from, doing tons and tons of Jewish genetic genealogy cases to tons and tons of non-endogamous populations, as well as other endogamous populations. But with non-endogamous populations, what I noticed is I always saw really good, significant longest blocks. And that was, I'm trying to remember the first non-endog, because it was probably about 2015 or so that I probably started working my first non-Jewish cases. And so I remember noticing then, like, you'd have these big long blocks, and I'd look at my Jewish lists, and they'd have 160 centimorgans or more, and they'd have longest blocks of like 12 centimorgans. And that was when I first started to really think about, like, oh my gosh, there must be something with the segments. And for those who do not know, when it comes to the segments, for endogamous population groups, you can use the segments to help you figure that stuff out. But I'm not going to get too tutorial in this. We're going to keep, I think what we'll do is, we'll kind of just jump through to the third episode. I talked about this in the last season as well, but one way, and the best way I think to look at it, is going through each branch and almost trying to disprove it instead of proving it. And just coming at it that way can be helpful in thinking of it differently, to try to find other documentation that maybe you wouldn't look up. Just
that's how a scientist thinks. So yeah, every field, that's kind of what they do. It's good methodology,
because you assume that the connection is correct. So maybe you find a census record.
One of the things I remember really specifically from this that Mr. Beat really, really loved was when I told him about the genealogical proof standard. And he was like, that is the standard that should basically be used for everything, because that is such a great way to look at it of how to make sure the proof of your statement or your conclusion is sound. And I remember he was like, he really loved that.
But maybe you want to look and see, are there other people with the same name in that same census year in the same area? Because that's a big mix-up that can happen. But from here, I want to hook in the Ancestry DNA profile that Mr. B has into
as well.
You can then link it to a different family tree through this. But
yeah, see, it's very tutorial like, where it's like, okay, we're on this page and you can do this here and do that there. But yeah, that's why I really changed up after this.
And we can evaluate, and it shows us family tree.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
this
it's
is how we're
literally
going to find out how Mr. Beat is
it's a
related.
tutorial
to
using Mr. Beat as an example.
So what I use is the Smart Copy tool. Now, to get the Smart Copy tool, you need to have a browser that allows extensions.
For this, what I had Mr. Beat do was tell me, first off, he already had videos on who his top favorite presidents are. So like, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how he's related to all his top 10 favorite presidents. But then I was like, okay, well, let me figure out his top 5 favorite historical figures other than presidents and use that, because I felt like that might give kind of a wider range of possibilities of relationship connections.
I know.
So that's basically where we're at, is like going through and figuring out how they're related.
But it was basically a genealogy of all these Jewish Belmonte families. And when you look at the line, you'll see I have a Gracia Belmonte through this line. And they hypothesized in that book that there's a connection through her family and then through Leah Jacob Nunez Enriquez to Sarah Dissa.
Oh crap! Are we going to find out how we're related?
I know.
So many people are going to be doing this. Going to be like,
when he joins us, we might chat a little about something else, but not quite yet.
Okay. All right. I'll just keep it playing here then.
And then going all the way.
So I think if I remember correctly, I ended up finding out they were like super distantly related, like not anything out of the ordinary, you know. Yeah, Mr. Beat reacts to Genie Vlogger reacting to Mr. Beat reacting to Genie Vlogger discussing Mr. Beat. Welcome to YouTube.
Way up until we can see her father, his father, his father, his mother, all the way, and we see, okay, her father, so Philippa de Lancaster, John of Gaunt, is her father, and Matt Beat descends from Joan Beaufort. So Mr. Beat and I, our shared ancestor.
Well, I just looked it up, and Eleanor Roosevelt was 5th cousins once removed with Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, who's this dude?
This is how you and Jarrett are related. This is like the common ancestor. Yeah. Look at him.
I am Matt of Douglas County, 1st Duke of Lawrence.
Lawrence
is John of Gaunt, 1st Duke of Lancaster, 1st Earl of Richmond, born in 1340, died in 1399. Now, is this true as I said? Well, it's basically unproven. And this is a major problem on Genie, and really it's a major problem on all of the family tree websites. When you look at family trees that are built by other people, there can be errors. It's basically, the way I think about Genie, it's kind of like Wikipedia of family trees. And in fact, there's a family tree website just like Genie, although somewhat different, called WikiTree, where it's that exact idea, doing family trees in a wiki style. So these type of trees are called collaborative trees, where there's just one tree, everything merges together, everyone works on a singular tree. But then errors will be there, and when you look at how are you connected to people, well, sometimes it might connect you to people, but that connection, there's an error that someone else added. So you have to go through and verify some of these connections. But before we jump into how Mr.
Yeah, that's one of the things I often have to throw into a lot of posts and things I do, where I'm like, look at how I found this connection between these people being distant related on Genie. And unless you go each generation, which is like with the connection between Mr. Beat and Matt Baker from Useful Charts, I did go on both of their lines. I went through each generation to make sure and verify. So like that's proven, even though it's super distant. Granted, that line, I had a lot of help in multiple ways. If you want, we'll kind of see some of it. But like, you know, like I had help from that librarian in Jennings County, Indiana. I had help from David Lambert from the New England Historical and Genealogical Society. Trying to remember what else, but yeah, basically, you know, there's a lot that goes into all of that.
Beat is related to his top 10 presidents. I had decided to message him asking, who were your top 5 historical figures that weren't presidents?
I just have to say, when I was coming up with what should I do for this part, I was like, oh my gosh, I've never done like a typing out the email video thing. And so I decided to do that. I don't know if it looked cool or not, but I don't know why that,
because I wanted to see what he said, and could it bring up some interesting connections. So I'm actually going to show you how you can do this yourself if you connect into the world tree. So we are on Mr. Beat's page.
All right, so I don't think we're going to go through every single one. I think what we'll do, because this is kind of interesting, because this is before he saw like the first 3 episodes in the Mr. Beat season. I don't really talk about the family history. I talk about it really more in genealogical sense of just like, here's the people and here's their names and here's where they lived, and that's about it. And then the last 4 episodes are the narrative story of the people, where they came from, what happened to them. And so I actually remember watching back on this part, because I really thought it was cool, because seeing him look at the tree and then knowing what it actually represented was really cool. We can also do a fan view, and then we that was like an inception. I said and then I heard myself.
We can also do a text view. Fan view is the dimensions. So we're going to add some dimension at research level, but we are going to build the dimensions for the other 3. And this is just really cool in that it shows you different things to think about with your tree. Okay, so the dimension's been added, and if you click the drop downs, you can edit the differies of birth.
Is part of Jersey. Huh.
I was just gonna say Jersey. Is that?
I imagine there.
All the country of birth for Mr. Beat's ancestry, and we see that there is a lot of the United States. So the red is the United States, and so these are all the people that were born in the U.S. and you can see where they were born. And then these are all of his.
Man, come back there a little bit. Oh wait. Oh well.
What are you looking for?
Tree.
All the American places.
Out of this, and now when we do dimensions, we'll get these options. So country of birth, and here we see all the country of birth for Mr. Beat's ancestry, and we see that there is a lot of the United States. So the red is the United States, and so
yeah, a lot of
in the U.S. And see this over here. This is all France. So when we click it, it's as well. All the people that
a lot of Midwest. Oh, started out in New Jersey.
These are all the people that were born in the U.S. and you can see where they were born. And then these are all of his ancestors as well. So then we can see this over here. This is all France. So when we click it, it's France. And we notice.
Yeah, a lot of, like I said earlier, Eastern France.
It's all in, or for the most part, it's all Alsace, Lorraine in that area.
Yeah.
So when you look at a lot of the French, it's a lot of the same areas, but not all of it necessarily. Then we also the purple is another one. He has a big amount.
I don't
from
think
Russia.
I covered any of the videos.
All of these different these family lines coming from Russia, and then we even see that
and that's the Volga, that Russian. That's the Volga German, which we're gonna watch the episode for that.
Some of the Russian ones, once you go back far enough, there's some different things going on. So German to Russia, then we have France to Russia. Then when we click off, we can also see we have Netherlands right here. And I know that the parents here, they should also be in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I never covered it. I don't think I ever covered his Dutch side either. Mr. Beat had a very typical American family tree from what I can tell, in that he had some of the more recent some of the more recent immigrant ancestry. So like, from the 1800s and onward, but then he also had a lot of that deep American roots, in multiple waves, ancestors coming in the 1700s, ancestors coming in the 1600s. And then he also had, I guess it's all 16, but ancestors coming in like the early years. And I think he had Mayflower ancestors, but not 100%.
And then we see we also get a whole lot of Germany.
A lot of revolutionary.
So when we click on Germany, we can see
and colonial ancestors.
There's a lot of it all over. I found that there's a big part of the family coming from Württemberg. There's also
all right. So I think what we're gonna do now is we're gonna jump to the other reaction. Life is a lot. I remember when he was trying to come up with this stream, he was like, what should I name it? And I was like, you should say Mr. Beat learns that his life is a lie. And he's like, that's great. I'll use that.
Hi. So I am Mr. Beat, and this is yet another live stream. I've been doing a lot of these lately. But this is part 2 of a reaction live stream to a series by Genealogist, Jarrett from Genealogist. He did an entire series on my family tree. And so we are here to watch episodes 4 through 7 tonight. I have not seen these yet. Mrs. Beat has seen them. My parents have seen them. Well, my dad hasn't seen the last 2 episodes, but I am seeing these for the first time, and I'm excited. It's also just.
So I think with these, we won't watch each episode for Mr. Beat. We'll just kind of click through certain parts.
All right, let's pull this research for him. One of the questions I had was, what are some of the things that you'd like me to look into in your family tree? Do you want me to look into any specific ancestors, any sort of connections to certain historical events? And one of the things he mentioned was that his 4th great grandmother, Mary Galtree, was supposedly a Powhatan Indian.
Yeah, Powhatan. It's a tough one. My mom says Powhatan. So
Now, Mr. Beat
I'm
sent
bad
me
at
a good amount of
pronunciation, too.
information on this branch of the family in terms of Mary Galtry's line descending down to Mr. Beat, but he had nothing else on Mary other than she was married to Lewis Whitcomb. And what he sent on Lewis and Mary was the following. He sent this page which showed all of this information, and at the top we see Lewis Arden Whitcomb.
Yeah, that's stuff that was passed down from to my grandmother, actually, my grandma Roush. So you know, it doesn't even. It's kind of like just random stuff that's jotted down here.
Was married to Mary Galtry, and here it's spelled Galtry, but we'll see even in this own document, it's spelled multiple ways. They were married in Jennings County, Indiana, and lived there until 1870 when they moved to Sheridan, Iowa. He went to California, he being Lewis, during the gold rush and wrote home to the family that he had struck it rich and would be coming home, but he never made it home and was considered killed for his money. Now, this is something we do want to remember for the future, but then we do see married Mary Galtry, a Powhatan Indian. Now, for anyone who is watching this and is really into genealogy or has done a lot of their own research into American families or just watched Finding Your Roots, you're probably questioning whether or not this is true.
Yes, I've always questioned whether or not that was true. Someone in the chat just said, Mr. Beat, are you related to John Cena? I think so, and then also someone else asked, am I John Cena? Well,
I think later in the live stream when I hopped on, I actually found that I looked up if he was related to John Cena, and I think he was. I mean, basically, if you're connected in the world tree and someone else is connected in the world tree, you're probably going to find a way that you're related as 20 to 30th cousins or so.
Mrs. Beat, no, I'm not going to slow this down because we have a lot to get through, and I have a bedtime, okay? I'm almost 40 years old. I'm getting old, okay? I'm an old man, and I need to get my beauty sleep because I have work to do. Okay.
One of the biggest myths in American genealogy is the myth of a Native American ancestor. Now, this is in all sorts of American families, but usually when I hear that, it's not so specific in saying this ancestor was Native American. It's usually we always heard that there was a Native American ancestor through this branch. But of course, we want to start looking into the records and see what can we actually find. So here we are back to the family tree for Mr. Beat, and we're looking at the tree with a focal point of his great-grandmother, Mabel Irene Whit.
For anyone who's on Ancestry, you're probably already noticing how different things look from back when I shot this, which was, let's see, the stream was 2021. So yeah, I think I did this back 2020, 2021. So only 4 years or so.
And through that family, we have her father, Joseph, tracing to her grandfather, Jesse. And then that traces to Mary Galtry and Lewis Whitcomb, who we were discussing. And in looking at them, we're going to pull up Mary's profile. We do see that there's a photo of her grave, and it's kind of interesting. It looks like there's a handshake, and I've already added it.
That's awesome. Again, this is linked, I believe, to the Find a Grave website. It's a great resource that's free. This gravestone is amazing. That's cool that they have it.
Too here, and I'm kind of giving things away because we already see their parents, Nathaniel and Elizabeth, and well, do those sound like their Native American names? No, not really. Doesn't necessarily mean they weren't, but everything keeps pointing to this is very doubtful that Mary was Native American. So going to the page on Find a Grave, here we have Mary Whitcomb's grave, and we're going to try to take a little bit of a closer look. Wow. And we can just kind of see it. It's a very, it looks like a small grave, but when we look at the Find a Grave page, there is a lot of information. We have a ton of siblings. We have a bunch of children.
Yeah, see, at this point, it was still very tutorial, like the way I was doing it. And I'm just going to kind of summarize, but basically through Find a Grave, I saw Jacob Fitzgerald Galtry and then saw these letters connected and found that they were connected to this site. And then
Assault,
we'll watch from here.
Now, this page is absolutely amazing. Now, this is I want to say a book. It might be more of a compilation. I'm not quite sure what it exactly be called, but this document is called The Civil War Letters of Jacob Fitzgerald to his wife, Emmeline.
So he wrote a lot, apparently, and they were able to preserve all of it. That's amazing.
Galtry by Charles M. Wright, and then transcribed with permission by Sheila Kell. Now, this goes into a lot of information. This is by Charles M. Wright, who is a descendant of Jacob Fitzgerald Galtry, and it talks about the family. It shows all sorts of pictures. So we have Jacob, his wife Emmeline, It shows them older. We saw those before. But then it also kind of gives a roadmap of who he talks about in the letters. And he talks about a lot of his family, including the ancestors of Mr. Beat. And there were actually a couple of Whitcombs who married Galtreys. And so these two families were close, and multiple members of both families served in the 37th Indiana Infantry.
And this family is a pretty good representation of what a lot of people will call American colonial endogamy. Granted, this is more in the 1800s and all of that, but basically it was, a lot of the families that especially had colonial ancestry in certain areas, in certain towns and stuff, especially that were a bit more isolated, a lot of those families would stay within the town, and a lot of their family, descendants would intermarry and stuff, endogamy, which is just people within one population group marrying others within one population group. But the big difference between American colonial endogamy and most endogamy is that it's not really like, many generations, like, 10 plus generations. It's only been like, 4 or 5 generations or so. And on top of that, there still is a lot of, exogamy. So people coming in and out of the community and having children with people from that community. But still, it really what it is it's just kind of a lot of pedigree collapse. So basically, anyone that is a descendant of the Whitcomb family and the Galtrey family, they're all probably related to each other in multiple ways, possibly more than 2 ways at least. And then same thing for people that are just regular descendants of the Whitcombs. Like I can't remember if it was Mr. Beat or Matt Baker, but one of them I think descended from the Whitcomb family in 2 different ways, actually. Now, looking at this paragraph, we can see Charles Wright describing the members of the Whitcomb Galtrey connections that are spoken about in the letters. So the Lucinda Whitcomb mentioned many times in Jacob's letters was the daughter of Israel Whitcomb and Sarah Sally Galtrey. Sally was a sister of Nathaniel Galtrey, who was Jacob's father. So Sally would be an aunt to Mary Galtrey. Then it goes on to say Lucinda Whitcomb and Jacob Fitzgerald Galtrey were first cousins. The Rachel sometimes mentioned with Lucinda in Jacob's letters were probably Rachel Whitcomb, Lucinda's younger sister. Lucinda was born in 1834, Rachel in 1842. They had a brother, Lewis J. Whitcomb, born in 1830, who died in the war at Nashville, Tennessee on August 1st, 1864. This Lewis J. Whitcomb should not be confused with the Lewis Whitcomb, husband of Mary Galtrey Whitcomb, 1817 to 1895, who was Jacob F. Galtrey's older sister, as well as Mr. Beat's 4th great-grandmother. The Lyman Whitcomb mentioned in Jacob's letters was a son of Lewis and Mary Galtrey Whitcomb. So this is a brother to Mr. Beat's ancestor, Jesse Whitcomb. And then they also mentioned that Lucretia, no last name, mentioned in his letters was probably Lucretia Whitcomb, Lyman's sister. They were both cousins of Jacob F. Galtrey. Lucretia was born in 1840 and Lyman in 1842. Lyman also served in the Civil War. Lucretia married in Jennings County, Indiana, to Joel Jackson. Now, I don't want to read too much off this website because, as we can see, I'm just going to kind of scroll down. There is a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, even just reading all of that was kind of like, yeah, my videos have changed a lot.
But it includes a ton of the letters, including, and scrolling back up, including a list. So there are 60 letters in the
just imagine the work that future genealogists are going to have to do, by the way, like
in the collection, and it gives you an idea of where he went. But knowing the 37th Indiana Infantry, we can also look at the history of the infantry of that regiment and see where were they, what battles they fought in, and then know exactly where he was. But one other thing that was supplied was this amazing piece. Elizabeth Fitzgerald Galtrey. Now this is Mary Galtrey's mother. So this is Mr. Beat's 5th great-grandmother.
Wow.
Born in 1798 in Pennsylvania. And the family tradition described her as Scotch-Irish and a Methodist who was orphaned at an early age. No record of her ancestry has been found. Now, there was something in the family tree on Ancestry where people had come up with family names for her parents, but I have not been able to confirm whether or not those are true. Now, one of the biggest things when it comes to genealogy is
maybe that's where some Native American or Powhatan heritage comes from, huh?
True. It's collaboration. And when you find amazing things like this, one of the best
things that you can do is to reach out. And so that's what I did. I reached out to both Charles Wright and Sheila Kell, Charles being who wrote this document, Sheila being the one who transcribed it with his permission. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get in touch with Charles, but I was able to get in touch with Sheila. Sheila has been doing genealogy for years and even has been the genealogist at the Jennings County Library. Now, if we remember, Mary Galtrey and Lewis Whitcomb were married in Jennings County, Indiana.
I've always been interested sort of in history.
Wow.
In high school, it was boring because it was remember the dates, remember that, there was.
That's not how I taught history in the classroom, by the way. That's
nothing interesting about it. Well, when you're looking at your own family, or to me now, anybody's family, if there's interesting stuff in there, it's almost like a way to gossip without getting in trouble. When I decided I was going to retire, I chose to move here because by then I had a clientele of people I was doing research for. And when I'd come down on the weekends, I would look up stuff for other people besides me. So once I moved here, I set up the research center here.
Now, one of the first things I asked her about was the Native American connection. Was there any connection?
She's a treasure, by the way. I can already tell you, she is a treasure, the work that she's doing. But anyway, yeah, so Native American connection, we're going to find out here.
Because I obviously didn't see it. And there seems to be some sort of indication in the family history from Mr. Beat. So what did she think?
Well, I'd say out of all my years at the library, 80% of people that came in thought they had some kind of Native American heritage. Of that 80%, I think it was down to, I found 3 in 10 years that were verifiable as Native American ancestry. Of course, back then, the farther back you go, the less online stuff you had. So we were fishing in the dark. But very seldom have I ever seen it turn out to be true. If he was Powhatan, that was in Virginia, in the Tidewater, if I remember, which is not where his family lived. So there's even traveling involved in this one.
Now, when I asked her about the family as a whole, and especially Mary, Sheila didn't really know a whole lot, but she did have a good amount of information on Jacob Fitzgerald Galtrey.
We do have, here is the book. It's a little hard to see there, and it's backwards, but that is the book that got me started with it back in 2009 when I put it on my website. Mostly what I've got on him was from what I read in here. He seemed to be a very devoted husband and father because in the book or in his letters, you can tell he's trying not to say some things about the war that he could say. As Charles that wrote it put in there, he was protecting his wife. He didn't want to tell her, of all the missing limbs and horrible things that were happening. So his is more chatty, talks about who's from home, other people he's getting letters from. There's another little blurb in there on William B. Whitcomb.
No, that's not Barbara Bush.
Military member of the Whitcomb family.
Okay.
So that, I'm kind of useless other than what few things I found so far.
You are not useless.
These people, well, we have the term bunnies. They had lots of babies. So the Whitcombs and
I always loved that. That was such a great description.
Were large families. Jacob appears to me to have been a very nice guy, just from reading what he was saying. It's nice to read the letters because you get some instinct about what kind of person he was. Was he worried about the family? Was it, he wasn't talking always about himself. It was more what's going on at home.
She also had somebody at the library look into things for us to see, were there any records or documents on Mr. Beat's ancestry, specifically to Mary Galtrey and Lewis Whitcomb. And in this room...
I just got to say, this is above and beyond. This is way beyond where I thought that, as far as the research he was going to do, like when Jarrett first emailed me saying he was going to look up my ancestry, I didn't think he would go this far, where he'd have other people looking in libraries in places like what you're seeing on the screen right now. Like that's intimidating to me. Like that's cool that he
on the shelf. That's true genealogy. Is you gotta figure out where the records are, and I always love that comment. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh boy, I have so much stuff in store. Oh, so in these boxes, in these folders, in this envelope were 14 pages on Mr. Beat's family, which had been done up at the request of a relative of his. And these pages included family templates filled out for 4 generations of the family, as well as a little bit more that the cousin.
There's a Lydia in there. Lydia Davis, born in 1798. Lydia is my daughter's name. Occupation, farmer. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think generations back. We're going to jump to another part. I think we're going to jump to the next episode. Or actually, let's listen to Mr. Beat's in between thoughts, and maybe I'll have something to say there.
This is going to be something that probably, surprises, I think, many of my relatives. And that was also revealing to me when, I forgot her name, but the genealogist that Jarrett was talking to from Indiana, 80% of people that think that they have Native American heritage actually don't. I guess I'm one of the 80%. So no power.
Well, it's unproven. It's unproven would be the better way to say it. There's always the possibility you do, and you just can't prove it. So, that'd be the better way to say it.
No evidence whatsoever that I have any Native American heritage at all in my family tree. But at least I'm pretty closely related to Edgar Whitcomb, who seemed like a pretty cool governor and pretty cool guy, and also, of course, Eisenhower. Those are two. All right, so we're going to go to the next video. What if I'm related to Donald Trump? We looked at that last time, and I'm not related to him very closely at all. Like, he didn't even show up, so I thought that was pretty funny. Okay, so next is episode 5. Oh, by the way, if you just joined us, Genie Vlogger is in the chat. Oh, and thank you. He put that fifth cousins four times removed is Eisenhower for me. So that's still pretty impressive, I like to think.
I still need to do a 10 question stream with Matt. I see him doing it with all those other YouTubers. I'm like, I need to get in on that.
And this is Ancestors in the American Revolution.
Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, Genie Vlogger, and on today's vlog, we will be looking into Mr. Beat's ancestors who were alive during the American Revolution.
I'm surprised that he's even able to go back that far. Like, I can't believe I had like.
On episode.
By the way, again, that's his band. Check out his band. I didn't know I had ancestors here going back to the 1700s. Like, I didn't think you could trace a branch. I thought that it would have all ended sometime in the mid-19th century. So that alone is surprising to me.
We briefly looked at Mary Galtry with through lines where we saw a whole bunch of DNA matches, 49 of them, who all descend from Mary E. Galtry and match Mr. Beat. And then in episode 4, we looked into the Galtry family and learned a bit more about Mary, her siblings, and her parents. So we're going to start tracing up from Mary's parents, who were Nathaniel and Elizabeth, and we're going to trace them back to some of their earliest days in America. And a big part of this we went over actually in the last episode, because when we looked at the information from Jennings County Library, what Sheila had sent, it included a 14-page document which had 4 generations of the family in these different types of family sheets, tracing the family back fairly far. So using that to correlate with what was on Ancestry, I was then able to have a fairly confident tree that we can then build off of and then go through the hints to correlate, possibly do some searching, and then any researching if we need to. Now here we have the family tree where Mary Galtry is the focal point. So slow. All right, we're going to kind of get through to one part. There really is not a whole lot. We do have abstract of a will, which is from 1779. And we have some different compiled census stuff, U.S. Census reconstructed records, but this is, 1790s and later. So when we look at the records, at least here, through our hints, the quick and easy stuff, there's not a whole lot. One thing that we can do, we can look at what records are available for Somerset County in New Jersey. But I'm sure many of you have noticed the dates of Oliver's birth and death, as well as his wife. And it's very apparent, including with Paul, that they were all alive during the Revolutionary War. And
well,
in 17...
But they died during the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like they died during it.
They were all alive during the Revolutionary War. And in 1777, it wasn't just an important year in the Revolution, it was also an extremely important year in the Galtry family. So this section that's about to come up was the section that I realized this is exactly how I need to do all of the entire episodes from
In
here
January
on out.
1777, the war had been raging for some time. On December 26th of 1776, there had been the Battle of Trenton after Washington had sailed over the Delaware.
Yep.
And then just about a week later, the Battle of Princeton took place. At this time, Oliver Galtrey's oldest son, Oliver, had joined the 1st New Jersey Regiment under Captain John Sebring and had also served under then Colonel Frederick Frelinghuysen. Oliver possibly even fighting at the Battle of Trenton and Battle of Princeton. But after the Battle of Princeton, Washington's army made their way north to Morristown, New Jersey, and they arrived just a few days after the Battle of Princeton on January 6, 1777. But after a surprise attack by the British on April 13, 1777, which would later become known as the Battle of Bound Brook, Washington decided to move the encampment to Somerset County, home of the Galtreys, and arrived on May 28th, staying until July 2nd. And this encampment became known as the Middlebrook encampment. And part of it was on the Galtrey land. It is largely agreed upon that the first official flag of the United States was most likely unfurled for the first time at the Middlebrook encampment. So it's possible that the first official United States flag was flown on the land of Mr. Beats' Galtrey ancestors.
All right, well, that I gotta play that again. That's pretty cool. That might be the coolest thing yet, if that is actually true. The first American flag to ever fly flew on the land of my ancestors. That's got to be like,
yeah, that was such a cool thing to find. Granted, it has to be said, may have flown on their land. We knew it flew at the Middlebrook encampment, or at least that's what historians largely agree upon, but it's not known where. So, you know, the encampment was on their land, part of it was on their land, then it, you know, leads to reason that it could have possibly been flown on their land. And at the very least, it probably means that his ancestors saw the first original flag fly. So definitely a lot cooler that, you know, if it flew on their land. But I mean, the fact that you have to say it's largely agreed upon by most historians that the first flag flew at Middlebrook, it's kind of, you know, it's a whole nother leap to say it definitely flew on his ancestors' land, but it's certainly possible it flew on their land. So it stands to reason that it could have. So a little grandiose of a statement of me to put in there, but, you know, definitely a good hook. And it's true. It's very possible.
I got to brag about that at every future party I'm at here. Let's hear this again. I want to just make sure that I'm hearing this correctly. Did you all hear that in the chat correctly? That's pretty cool.
State's flag was flown on the land, is on the Galtrey land.
I love
it is largely agreed upon that the first official flag of the United States was most likely unfurled for the first time at the Middlebrook encampment.
Wow.
So it's possible that the first official United States flag was flown on the land of Mr. Beats' Galtrey ancestors. But only a month and a half after Washington's troops began their encampment on February 28, 1777, Oliver Galtrey died and left Helena a widow, looking over the 7 children that were still at home. Now, I tried to find any information on Oliver's death, and the only thing that I could was an abstract of his will from 1779, so 2 years after his death, and it really didn't give much information.
Yeah.
So the cause of death is unknown. But because Helena would allow Washington's army to camp on her property, causing her depredation, she is now recognized as a patriot of the Revolution. Now, if you do find that you have a patriot ancestor just like Helena,
that's very cool. I want to see this.
Now, if you do find that you have would allow Washington's army to camp on her property, causing her.
Okay, so rank patriotic service.
I would have been such a bad researcher if all I put up was the Ancestry posting of somebody else doing the DAR thing. So I kind of, when I put that in there, I actually put it in there as kind of a little teaser of like, oh, I'm going to get into the DAR records, but also kind of like is something just to tease, like not a teaser, like, you know, hey, this is coming up, but like to tease people that would be like, oh, seriously, you're going to take a snapshot of someone posting it to Ancestry and put it up, just kind of like that. And then be like, oh, look, I actually went and did the DAR and the SAR records. And I got people from the NEHGS to help me on that.
How about that? Yeah. And her husband probably died of smallpox, right? It was probably some disease.
I think we're going to fast forward again. I think I just basically for the Mr. B one, because there's so much. I mean, we're talking about multiple episodes. For when we watch Steve Heimler's reaction and Drew Durnill's reaction, we're going to watch the whole thing. I'm not going to skip through it like I am now. But because Mr. Beats was an actual like live stream reaction. So just to kind of click over here, this is David Lambert from the New England Historical Genealogical Society. And he's also part of the Sons of the American Revolution, SAR. And so I had him on talking about the Struble family. So basically, he kind of, showed how to look up these records using the Struble family as an example. But then I went into the actual Struble family, and that's where we're going to watch from, because that's where I think it'll be fun to have the reaction.
And I've been, like I say, just been a member for a few years, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly.
But one really interesting thing about Dietrich, and going back to the family tree, we see with his father, Andreas Struble, Andreas actually had a sister, and that sister would end up marrying a man by the name of Eisenhower. And for anybody who remembers episode 3, Struble is the family through which Mr. Beat is related to Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it is through this aunt of Johann Dietrich Struble, or Andreas Struble's sister. And I was actually able to find an extremely interesting page that was digitized from a book about the family. So here we have the digitized pages 452 and 453 from the Eisenhower Genealogy, a postscript by Hans F. Friedrichs. The man who would marry Andreas Struble's sister was Hans Nicholas Eisenhower, and he settled in northwest area of Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania, in what was known as...
Okay, so look at this. On the very same day on which Dwight D. Eisenhower was inaugurated as president of the United States, but 200 years earlier, on the 20th of January, 1753, a survey was made of the land on which his great-great-great-grandfather, Hans Nicholas Eisenhower, spelled it that way, was to settle, and it was in Fredericksburg, or northwest of Fredericksburg, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County.
Lancaster.
Wow. Okay.
As someone who pronounces things terribly, I shouldn't laugh at that. But
then in Lancaster County, it's actually noted in the Pennsylvania Gazette that on August 12, 1756.
Now, this is something I always wonder if a lot of genealogists do, but it's definitely something I suggest is when you're reading something like a book like this, where it says in this newspaper on this date, I'm always like, okay, well, let me see if I can find it. And so that's exactly what I did here. Was
county.
I saw
it's actually noted in the Pennsylvania Gazette that on August 12, 1756.
So Pennsylvania Gazette, August 12, 1756. Only had a couple of pages for the newspapers back then, not like newspapers today. So it was just a real quick.
It was reported that Indians had burned the log house of Nicholas Eisenhower.
But like it was interesting because it was just a lot of it was just like a section in the newspaper of like the goings on of things that have been happening. So like this one, it's just this paragraph that it relates to by a letter from Fort Henry in the Berks County, dated August the 7th. There is advice that the Indians are hovering about that neighborhood, some of them being seen almost every day, and that they had burnt the house of Nicholas Eisenhower. So that was the blurb that they were referencing in that book. And then everything else is like something else. Then, below you can see from Barbados, we learned the 2 Martinico men, whatever, and then above it's something different. So
now, before Eisenhower had immigrated to America, the Struble family had immigrated first. Andreas's brother Friedrich had landed in Philadelphia back in 1731, and later he would then go to Hessen to find a wife. And it was at this wedding, which was on April 18, 1741, in Newnheim.
Wow, this is my connection to Eisenhower. This is so crazy. We're looking at my connection to Eisenhower right here. It's like more than just looking at a tree, or wow, we have
it's more
documents.
Than the names and the dates. It's the story.
Quite a bit more solid evidence here.
How did they come across the Neckar from Heidelberg? That Hans Nicholas Eisenhower, who was a husband of Anna Margaretha Struble, which is Friedrich's sister, was in attendance. Friedrich gave such an enthusiastic account of Pennsylvania that Hans Nicholas Eisenhower decided to follow the Strubles to Pennsylvania. So had it not been for Friedrich Strubel, Mr. Beat's great uncle, the Eisenhowers, specifically Hans Nicholas Eisenhower, would not have come to the U.S. Now that's it for,
well, you know,
for today's episode. But on next week's episode, we're going to start looking into some family tree lines of Mr. Beat that trace a little deeper into American history.
Okay, so far what we've learned: A, I'm not related to Pocahontas. B, I have Civil War ancestors that Civil War veteran ancestors who actually fought on the Union side in Indiana. These are all related to the Whitcombs. And again, we found out more information about my distant ancestor, Governor Edgar Whitcomb, former governor of Indiana in the late 60s, early 70s. What else we've learned is I had patriots in my ancestry. I never knew that. I had at least 2 ancestors who got recognized for service for the patriot cause during the Revolutionary War. And then that last part there, we actually found more information on the connection between Dwight Eisenhower and myself. Has nothing to do with Kansas, although our families ended up in Kansas later on. You know, one of those things. But that's what we've learned so far. We have 2 more episodes to go. If you're just joining me, we've been going through my family tree. I've been reacting to Genealogist's series where he dug deep into my family tree. I've never seen this stuff. This is all new information to me. I'm not a genealogist, of course. It's not really that much of a hobby of mine. I haven't really ever looked into it. So this is all, you are seeing this at the same time as me.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this reaction, be sure to click right here to see another. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.